Okay, this is going to be a heavily semantic talk, and I'm going to do my best to not make it to make it accessible. And I will try to look at those faces that I see to figure out if I am succeeding or not. So please stay there and be shocked and horrified if you're not understanding things. I'm trying to pin things. Yeah. So what this talk is not about is all kinds of syntactic things. So I'm not going to be talking about the fact that caritives, well, yeah, I will not going to be defining caritives either. I'm just going to be looking very simply at PPs of the kind without plus NP. I'm not going to be talking about the fact that caritives cross-linguistically can be PPs or cases, or as we have heard earlier, verbal constructions or even adjectives. I'm not going to be talking about sentential modifiers, so like left without looking back, or predicates, which is kind of difficult but still available. So this presentation is without equal, not talking about my presentation, but anyway. I am not going to be talking about caritives that have clausal complements, so things like without looking back, or their contrast with nominal complements. And I am not going to be talking about very much about caritives that contain determiners. So I will be mostly talking about bare NP caritives, such as you probably know the expression sans peur et sans reproche, without fear or yeah, whatever. So what this talk is about, I want to be talking about what looks like indefinite caritives in one. And as you will see, I'm giving two examples, not giving examples in English. I'm giving examples in French, and I'm giving an example in Dutch. And the reason why I'm doing so is because French and Dutch show this kind of a caritive without a determiner. In English, you see an indefinite article there. Like so in 1b, you see without an operating system. But in Dutch, you do not see any article there, and neither would you see indefinite any article in French. And this is why I am appealing to these languages, because only in these languages you can reliably syntactically distinguish an indefinite article that is a strong indefinite article, so like asserting the existence of something, as opposed to an indefinite article in English that is just an indication of singularity. So that's why I'm going to be mostly talking about Dutch and French. I will be giving Russian examples, I will be giving English examples. But the reason why I'm talking about Dutch and French is because there you can see a bare noun there, and this is something that needs to be explained. So as the plan of the talk suggests, I'm first going to be talking about the absence of the article. In fact, I have mentioned something about this already. Then I'm going to be talking about the fact that even though there's no article in this bare caritive, you still see something that looks like scope. So you see something like you see something that you would seem to expect from an article being there. Then I'm going to be talking about how the notion of possession comes into caritives and how it interacts with the data that we would have seen by then. And then I will try to discuss what it means. Why is it the case that there's no definite article, there's no indefinite article there, and what it corresponds to in semantic terms. So I will be drawing, I will not be drawing, but I will be showing some trees, and I will be presenting some lambdas, and I will do my best to explain what all these things stand for, so as to, I will honestly try to make it clear what the puzzles are, even if you are not completely immersed into this kind of stuff, or like me, cannot follow it on the fly, right? So, but again, I'm trying to look at you guys in the chat and see if people are very confused or not very confused, and whether I can make things clear. Obviously, I'm not seeing everybody. I'm sorry, but this is not my restriction. This is software. Okay, so the first issue that I want to raise is the status of bare NPs, that is NPs, noun phrases that do not have articles, in languages that normally do have articles, definite or indefinite. So if you look at examples like 2, which provide instances of bare NPs from different languages, what you would expect if you're a learner of one of these languages is that all the bold NPs would have some sort of an article. Because, come on, if you're a speaker of Russian, which doesn't have articles, and then you enter a language that does have articles, and you realize, God, they have those things all over the place, then you're totally and completely puzzled by situations where you don't have them anymore. And as you can see, in translations in 2A, for instance, in English you would see an article, but in Brazilian Portuguese you wouldn't. So why and what's going on? And people who have worked on these kinds of examples in different languages, I give a bunch of references. This is a very small subset of the enormous number of people who have worked on the topic. People sort of agree that when you have when in the language that normally has articles on NPs in noun phrases in argument positions, if you don't see an article, this probably means that what you're dealing with is not something referential, but rather something defining a property. So like a set. So for instance, in 2A, carro, car, would not mean a particular car. It would mean the set of cars that Maria entertains a relation with. And in 2B, when you see the bare NP predicate, and it's even in the singular, the idea is that obviously this is not some teacher. This is the set of teachers, and Jan and Sophia are members of the set of teachers. So when people try to write out the semantics for sentences that contain bare NPs, what they try to do is to write it in such a way as to make these bare NPs not referential in of any sort. So they will be talking about properties, that is sets of entities, or they will be talking about kinds. Okay, and one important property of bare nominals in the languages that normally have articles, especially including indefinite articles, is that they have narrow scope. What this means is that whereas if you say, so look at 3. So if you say Damien didn't eat a cake, there is an interpretation to the sentence which means there's a cake that he didn't eat. There might be there might be a cake that he did eat, but there's also a cake that he didn't eat. There's an assertion of the existence of some cake that he didn't eat. But if you look at 3 and you say Damien didn't eat green beans, this does not mean that there are some green beans that he hasn't eaten. It means for all the green beans that we're dealing with, he hasn't eaten them. All right, so basically there's no assertion of existence of green beans outside of the scope of negation, right? So it might be that he didn't eat any green beans because there were none. So basically, when you're dealing with a bare NP and you're writing out the semantics of the sentence containing a negation and a bare NP, you cannot say something like there exists an entity such that something does not happen to it. What you must do is say, it's not true that there exists an entity, right? So if your bare NP, bare noun phrase, happens to appear in the syntactic representation of a sentence below negation, then in the interpretation of the sentence, it must also be found in the scope of negation, right? So this is important, and we will come back to this shortly. Okay, so why do we care about all this semantic stuff and languages like Brazilian Portuguese, which we don't interact with in normal life? Because if you look at examples like for, again, I'm bringing in a French example with a bare NP, it turns out that this example is ambiguous. It has two interpretations, at least. One is a bag without a handle means a bag that doesn't have any handles whatsoever, has never had any handles. It's a clutch, right? It's like a handleless bag. However, it also has another interpretation. It has the interpretation that there's a bag, there's a handle to this bag, and that is missing. Right, so this is the illustration in 4b. This illustration to the right, there's a bag, there's a missing handle, and presumably on the other side of the bag, there's another handle. So under the second interpretation, it cannot be claimed that the interpretation of the sentence is it's a bag that has no handles. Okay, whereas in the first interpretation, this is what the interpretation is. So what we observe is that an NP internal caritive of this kind is ambiguous in a way that a less caritive is not, right? So a handleless bag does not have the interpretation in 4b. It cannot mean that there's a bag with a handle missing. So how do we achieve this ambiguity? Again, if you're a semanticist and you have a sentence that asserts existence and contains negation, the first thing you want to do, especially if you're looking at English, is to say, oh, this is scope. So there is an existential on one side, there's negation on the other side, and you can move them around to get the two relevant interpretations. Why doesn't it work here? Because, as I said, the NPs are bare, right? So they do not have an article, and we have already seen, no, we haven't seen, but other people have shown from previous work that when you are dealing with a bare NP, they cannot engage in this kind of changing relations. So let us first see what the actual ambiguity is, and then try to see how we can deal with this. Okay, so I will now say something that is very obvious to everybody here, which is people who have worked on without, which are not many in formal linguistics, have all noticed the incredible fact that without has something to do with possession. And it also has something to do with negation, and in fact, it's the negation of possession. People, however, are very reticent about how they actually express this intuition. So the best things I could find in the early literature is in 5, where Miller suggests that you have the construction, you have the combination of negation with the NP that is then combined with possession. And what this corresponds to interpretationally would be something like 6. So it's either not having an X or having no X. And you can observe that there we have two possible orders. One is about having not having something, and the other one about having the negation of something. This is just there for confusion. So don't pay attention to this. These are just two different representations of the same meaning. So in 7, you get a slightly formalized form. If you're if you're at ease with lambdas, you can look at it and see if it has any errors. Basically, this 7 means something like a set of individuals, set of entities, such that there's no x such that x is a handle, and these entities have that. So it's a set of things that don't have a handle. Okay. In 8 is a very formal representation of with and without that you can just safely skip for now. What is important, however, is the existential quantifier inside. Because why is it important? Because it basically says the assertion of existence or non-existence comes from the lexical entry of without or with, right? So the noun that without combines with does not provide any existential. It just provides a property, the property of being a handle in our case. And the existential comes from somewhere else. It comes from inside without. So this is how we encode in a way the intuition that there's negation there and then there's possession in there. The possession part is like the assertion of existence. What it means in normal human terms, in 8b, it means something like there's no handle that a bag has. I mean, it's not what 8 means, but this is what it would translate into when applied to bags and handles. Obviously, this is not quite right because it does not explain clutches. 4b is the clutch. Okay, you have the handout, but obviously you're only seeing my screen at the moment, so you cannot see this. I will try to just make it clear. Or it cannot account for examples like a table without a leg, where this noun phrase, a table without a leg, does not mean a table that has absolutely no legs. Now, I need to make a comment about dialectal differences because it shocked me when I first ran into this, and it might even shock you. Oh, sorry, that was too fast. So when I was looking at different languages, I'm setting English aside because English is hugely confusing. I discovered that things like a dog without a paw, so the example 9a in Russian and its correspondence in Dutch and in French, actually evoke two different responses from the people who I talk to. The first response, which is what I think I now have no judgments whatsoever on the topic, so don't ask me what my judgments are. But one set of people say this is horrible because it sort of implies that dogs only have one paw. The other set of speakers say, okay, this means that's a dog and it's missing one paw. I was surprised. I don't even remember which judgment I originally had, but at some point I stopped having either. So I start looking now. I look at these examples and they're all weird. So if you're a kind of a speaker who thinks these examples are ungrammatical, be sure you're not the only one. Likewise, if you're the kind of speaker who thinks, yeah, they're okay, you're not the only one. I have not tried to do any formal investigation of what this correlates with or how this works or whether dogs and tables work differently in this respect. I just noticed that there's a dialectal difference here. And it will be relevant later, the fact that it's there. Okay. Oh God, 10 minutes and I've, okay. So the reason why this is important is that these examples where the non-existence of any pose or non-existence of any handles is not asserted, is that unlike our previous examples with bags and with clutches, they sort of assert the opposite scopal relation. So there's what they're trying to say is something, there's a paw that the dog doesn't have, right? It's not what we have been seeing so far, like the assertion this bag doesn't have a unique handle, the only handle that it has. It's the opposite. It's like saying there's a handle that the bag doesn't have. And if you try to write it out semantically in a very simple way, like in 10, so if you say a bag without a handle means it's a bag and there is a handle that it doesn't have, this is completely ridiculous. Why? Because there's always a handle that the bag doesn't have, right? Like a handle of some other bag, this bag would not have. So what we seem to need here is something like, it's not any handle that the bag doesn't have, it's just its handle, okay? And this is where we enter the domain of what possession is. And this is a subject for not even a talk, but a series of lectures. And I'm going to skip it completely. And just say one thing. People who have worked on possession, on verbs like have and the possessive relation, have eventually come to the conclusion that it's not the case that the verb have provides any kind of semantics of possession. What it does, it capitalizes on already existing relations. So if you say something like Mary has a sister, have does not provide any relation between Mary and some other individual. The word sister does. So, and likewise, when you say something like Mary has the bag has a handle, or a bag with a handle, again, it's not with or have that provide the relation between the bag and the handle. It's whatever the semantics of the word handle is. And I don't think I have the time to get into this very much. But what I do have the time for discussing is what we could try to do. So what this would mean for the lexical entry for without. So if you look at 13, which is simple, which is with, this means something like, I will take a relation. So some notion, some relation that exists between individuals. In 14, this will be the handle. So being the handle of is a relation. And then I will take a set, and then I will return an individual that enters into the relation between, into that relation with a set. I know that, okay, so this is very confusing. I should slow down. A bag with a handle would mean something like a set of individuals such that there are individuals that they enter into the handle of relation with. This is very confusing if you're not a semanticist, and if you're, and even if you're a semanticist and do not work on possession. But in essence, this translates into with does not introduce the relation between bags and handles. The relation comes from somewhere else, from the semantics of handles, from the pragmatics of bags, etc., from the situation that you might be dealing with. Like, for instance, if I am a woman with a chair, this could come from the pragmatics of the situation of playing musical chairs. It is not extremely relevant at this point because until we get to something like 16. So in order to be able to talk about things like dogs without paws, without a paw, what we need to say is something like, or a bag without a handle where multiple handles are envisaged. What we need to have is something like 16. And you will see this is the interpretation of that allows a dog to have multiple paws and a bag to have multiple handles. So a bag without a handle means a set of entities that are bags such that there exists an individual, that it is the handle of that bag, and that bag does not have that handle. That gives you the right truth conditions, but it has multiple problems. A, it does not explain what happens with clutches, because clutches do not have handles that could be called their handles. Secondly, if you try to say something, there exists a handle of this bag that the bag does not have, then we run into wrong truth conditions for plural caritives, such as 18. So if you say dress without buttons, this does not mean there are some buttons that the dress is missing. So the semantics that I have written out sort of in 16 is wrong for this kind of, for plural caritives. Only the other one should work. Okay, I think I have now confused you very, very much. So here is an intermediate summary that will probably have to be the main summary. Everybody agrees that the caritive relation is negative in parasitic on possession. However, the scopal relation between the existential that is introduced by the caritive and the negation that is introduced by the caritive is not clear. So if you say that the negation scopes over the existential, there exists no X such that X is a handle and the bag has it, then the bag has no handles whatsoever. If you say there is an X such that it is a handle and the bag doesn't have it, then you're okay with bags that miss one handle, but you're in serious trouble with bags that don't have any handles at all, like clutches, or you're in trouble with plurals. And in addition, if you notice, such an interpretation requires you to have the possessive relation sort of twice. First, you say, it is a handle of that bag. That's one possessive relation. And then you need to say, and that bag does not have it. That's the second possessive relation. However, the interpretations that we get seem to suggest that both scopal relations are needed. And the puzzle is how to achieve them in a language like French or Dutch, where we have bare NPs that cannot be used to achieve these two scopal relations. So the puzzle is double, not only that you have those relations, but also that you don't have the means of achieving this in standard terms. And so we have a puzzle. One more part of the puzzle that I have not been mentioning so far is, of course, that bare NPs are not the only possible complements of without. You can also have things like without Mary or without any recourse, where you wouldn't want to stick in an existential, right? So everything that I have been doing so far was sort of assuming, oh, the existential is introduced by without. But this will obviously not work where it comes to all other kinds of complements of without. So as I don't have very much time left at all, I will just hint at the solution. What I want to be doing is to appeal to the idea that yes, indeed, when you have a bare NP, you are dealing with a kind. So not some sort of an entity, but actually a kind, like a handle kind or a leg kind or a paw kind or whatnot. And the relations that you are establishing or not establishing when you're dealing with without are relations with a kind. And a little bit of evidence that comes into this, that helps me towards this conclusion are the so-called weak definites, which are things that are definite, like, okay, so I'm going too fast. There's morphologically weak definites, which we don't care about and we just skip. And then we have semantically weak definites, such as 21. And look at 21a. So when you say John was hit on the arm, you're using a definite. However, most human beings have more than one arm. And this is very similar to what we have been seeing with the singulars in without, right? So when we talk about the bag without a handle and the dog without a paw, what we're observing is something like this. Like we're asserting the we're talking about the singular as if it was the only one, as if it was the definite, and that's why we have those two dialects, right? So you use a singular because there's only one. However, for some people and in some situations, it is possible to use this thing, thing that looks like a definite, even in a situation where more than one referent is present. So this is the connection that I've been trying to draw to establish for bare NP caritives, that what is going on is not a relation with a particular individual or even any kind of existential quantification, but a relation with a kind. And in fact, there is some evidence that these semantically weak definites can, in some languages and in some situations, as in 22, can alternate with bare NPs. So if you say something like he went to the hospital, not, which means basically he got sick and had to be hospitalized. For a different word like prison, you will be dropping the definite article. And obviously, in these situations, you're not dealing with a real single definite NP. So in essence, what I'm trying to do is to appeal to the hypothesis that when you have a bare NP, you're dealing with a kind, provide some evidence that indeed you have the difference between, you have the evidence for something being definite in a strange, weak way that normally entails the existence of just one individual, but is compatible with there being several of them, and trying to achieve the existential quantification, what looks like existential quantification, not from the real existential quantification, but from a relation with a kind. This is what I tried to do in 25, and I know that I went too fast, but maybe this is all for the better because I have not had the time to look into lambdas in any kind of depth. So the handout is there. You can have a look at it. You can ask questions if, well, you probably have a lot of questions, and I will try to answer them. But just to wrap up, I have not provided a real solution. I have only provided the direction in which I think the solution lies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ora. This was really very interesting and intriguing. So there is some 12 minutes for questions and comments, and I have seen in the chart that Natasha Berkova has a couple of comments.
Can I speak now?
Yes, please.
Thank you for your talk. I have really a couple of comments. So first of all, to just specify, do I remember it correctly that French or Dutch do not really have special attributive caritive markers? Is this correct? So that they correspond more or less also to this English less adjectives.
French and Dutch are like, have the correspondence of the English
Negative.
Without, or the English or the Russian biz. There is, I don't think French has the correspondence of less, but Dutch does.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah, they have this loss and similar suffixes. Okay. Thank you. So I would really like to thank you for mentioning the presuppositions that are probably related to characters. Though I would like to see, I don't know, an expansion of such work. Probably, I hope that someone will look at it in more detail, because I did my work on the prepositions in commutatives, and actually the thing is that they are not that easily negated. So usually when it's not because of the two participants which have equal involvement, more or less, it's not easy to negate just the whole situation. So usually what is negated is the really the participation of only one of them. And here I think without we have really these different kinds of presuppositions. And I would like to ask you, don't you think that this is kind of pragmatic explanation related to some common knowledge expectations? I mean, I see what you mentioned about kinds, but it probably has not been too much elaborated. So, I mean, don't we use the caritive phrases when these absentees are really highly expected from our common knowledge? So because even when we drink tea without sugar, and when we can ask someone about this, that we want it without sugar or something, we actually know that usually the tea itself has no sugar anyway, but we know that, yeah, the sugar is an option, so it's also not a property of this tea actually. So there is no inherent relation between tea and sugar, but we just know from the common knowledge about the world that this is a very, very frequent, very typical situation. So by emphasizing this, we get this caritive construction or construct of the this relation. So this is what I would like to see probably more works about, because it seems that this thing about characters is still not investigated. So this is one of my comments. So if you can answer something to that, and then there will be just one last very short comment.
I think there are several things that need to be disentangled. One is what I've been talking about is about whether there is a pre-existing, there is some sort of a relation between the possessor and the possessee in the caritive construction that is introduced by the discourse. This is one part. But the other one is why we use caritives to begin with. And I did wonder for a while about what our how they interact with our expectations, until I realized that almost any VP modifier or NP modifier behaves in this way. Like, so if you talk about cutting the bread carefully, you're already bringing into the discourse all various ways of cutting the bread, different manners, right? So this seems to me not the property of the caritive construction itself, but rather the fact the property of modification in general, both NP internal and clausal. When you introduce an additional modifier of any sort, you're introducing all the alternatives that it brings. On the practical side, these can be highlighted or not highlighted. So one example that was given to me at some point was something like, French is a language without ejectives, or Russian is a language without a glottal stop. This does not violate any expectations, or it does not, and it does not bring any expectations with it. It's just a sentence about different characteristics of a language, right? So my guess is that while we do observe some setting up of expectations, this is highly contextual and a property of modification in general, not something that is special to caritives.
Okay, okay, thank you. But still, it's a good thing to consider. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
it's a
had
very
a
good
vague
question.
idea. I had a vague idea that maybe there is something about compatibility, but then, of course, in this example with the languages, you can have really big sets of what we can have in a language. Yes, thank you. And the last question was just a comment on that. In the languages with derivational characters, as in Turkic, probably, couldn't it be interesting to look at these interpretations? So I would suppose that they are more likely to have a more generalized kind of distribution. So like as an attributive thing, so that the handless bag would be just kind of all bags that don't have any hands and not the bag that somehow lost its hand.
Yes, you're
Of course,
totally
it's
right.
just a wish, but yeah.
Even if you look at less in English, it does not have this kind of ambiguity. It's always, as far to the best of my knowledge, it's always the total negation. It's negation of having any kind any. It's not having any handles, or it's not having any pose. But also observe that it does not, the less suffix does not combine with entity denoting constituents. So it does not combine with proper names. It does not combine with quantified NPs. I would guess that what we're dealing with here is indeed a combination with properties, with a set, with the negation of existence. So what people usually think without is, right, just simply saying, does not have any handles. It's not the case that there exist any handles that it has, right? And this is a lot simpler than without it.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you for all your comments.
Thank you very much for your comments. That was very useful.
We have time for one very short question answer pair still.
My guess is we will have to do without questions.
Well, probably then I would allow myself a short comment. This is really very enlightening, and I would think that this could lead to very to important insights into cross-linguistic variation, partly based on on how general the particular caritive expressions in particular languages are. For instance, in languages where certain caritive expressions are, for instance, parasitic, are formally parasitic on possessive or existential predicates. And especially in languages like in some of the languages I work with, but I haven't worked on caritives a lot, where different sorts of relations are expressed by different possessive or existential predicates. This could lead to some potential implications for this type of analysis. So I think it's really interesting and really something we should look into.
Well, I would be happy to talk to anybody who has figured out how to connect this to their own research.
So thank you very much, Ora. Thank you, everybody. And as far as I understand, it's time for lunch now.